Diana, can you tell us a little bit more about the neuroscience of resilience?
Yeah. So there's a lot that happens in the brain that can either advance us more towards resilience or be protective or can kind of be an obstacle to resilience. So I think of the neurobiology in sort of two big systems. There's the kind of structure of the brain, and then there's the neurochemicals, which I know, Brian, you're an expert in. So if we think about structure of the brain and how that's involved in resilience, and there's lots of areas of the brain, of course, that are involved in resilience, but there's three main. And the first is the amygdala. So this is kind of our emotion center, right? Our threat detector, our brain's like big flashing siren. And this is the area of the brain that alerts us to danger or to threat. And the amygdala, I think we are seeing it more active than ever in today's work environment because of a couple different things, what we're just talking about, the pressure to perform, the competitiveness, the fear of, losing your job. So there's that uncertainty, and our brain does not like uncertainty. So our brain sort of sees change in general as a threat. And this is really evolutionarily has been helpful. If we think of our ancestors, if they walked outside and they saw an area of grass that was tamped down, they didn't have time to activate that frontal lobe and think, oh, I wonder if there's a predator. Is it a bear? Is it a lion? What should I do? Should I run to the east or run to the west? No, the brain just developed this immediate like fight or flight mechanism. So our sympathetic nervous system, which gets activated, requires a lot of our energy, but allows us to either flee or fight, a threat. The problem today is that in the workplace, our brain is constantly going into or activating that fight or flight reaction, fight, flight, or freeze reaction. So it can happen. And I'm sure if either of you have had this happen, you know exactly what I'm talking about when you just get a DM from your manager saying, hey, can we chat? Right? Our frontal lobe is not really involved in that. Our amygdala immediately activates the nervous system and it's like, oh, a shark is after me, right? I am in literal physical danger. So that amygdala, when it's activated, and the fact is in our work environment right now, there is so much change and uncertainty and unpredictability. In addition to kind of the high pressures of performing and being efficient and all of those things. So the amygdala is kind of the one area of the brain, I think, that is so important in resilience, because when that amygdala is always active, then we are just worn out. We are more likely to go into burnout. We might actually have depression and suicidal ideation. So there's a lot that can happen there. Second structure of the brain, I would say, is that frontal lobe or prefrontal cortex. That's our kind of thinking brain, our problem-solving brain, executive functioning. That's the part of the brain that can notice, oh, the amygdala has activated my fight, flight, or freeze, but I am actually not in danger. So that's the part of the brain that can help us kind of regulate that emotional response. We might not be able to prevent that initial response, but we can start to help the amygdala kind of return to baseline a little bit quicker using our cognitive skills, our thinking skills. And then the third area is the hippocampus. That's our memory center. And that's a part of the brain that can remember, ooh, when my manager asked if we could chat, 2 years ago, and I went in a total spiral, I remember that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. And so when this thing is happening to me today, I can remind myself that, I got through that hard time, or I got through that stressful situation. And here's what I used. Here are the tools or strategies that I used to help me get through that stressful time and build that resilience. So kind of knowing like what works for you. So that's the kind of structural part. And then we have those neurotransmitters or neurochemicals, the feel good part of the brain that helps with things like mood regulation. So serotonin, reward, dopamine, calming, GABA, and just those different types of chemicals that we can do things to help boost our brain's ability to make and utilize those chemicals. We can also do things that can lead to our brain being more likely to kind of deplete or not make as many of those chemicals. So we can talk about some of those strategies later if you want to. But I think that is the neurobiology of resilience, in addition to, of course, environment, all social support, all of those other things too.
I really appreciate you mentioning and focusing on the ways that the brain reacts to threats automatically as
Yeah.
being something that we might not necessarily have control over, but that what we do have control over is how we respond to that using a different part of the brain that kind of helps us, the prefrontal cortex that helps us regulate and respond. I think that's a really key piece of understanding this kind of stress regulation.
Yeah. And the good news is, in most of the research, what they have found is, yeah, there are people who are maybe a little bit more biologically prone to be resilient, but resilience can be learned. And I think that is a really positive message.
Totally.
Yeah.
When I really like the interplay between, our thoughts and, our decision making with the actual biological structures within the brain. And it's not some fantasy that you sort of meditate and you imagine these neurotransmitters are working more than these, and so that regulates things. But you're actually doing that when you're thinking about these resilience techniques and skills.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.